Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a massive paradigm shift, and it's all inspired by the philosophical concepts in a really fascinating book called The Courage to be Disliked. Now, think about your daily life for a second. What if the thing ruining your life right now, the thing causing you the literal most stress, is actually just your addiction to other people's approval? I want to start off by asking you kind of a deeply uncomfortable question, one that might challenge literally everything you know about your own unhappiness. Are you ready? What if your past is not controlling you? See, most of us operate under this heavy assumption that the bad things that happen to us are entirely dictating our present circumstances. But what if we've got that completely backwards? Here's a wild thought. Most people never realize this, but their misery, it isn't a trap they're stuck in. It's actually a hiding place. We subconsciously choose this hiding place just to avoid the risk of rejection. We stay in these comfort zones, even if those zones make us completely miserable, because the alternative, putting ourselves out there and actually being judged, well, that just feels way too dangerous, doesn't it? We spend practically our entire lives just trying to be accepted. We take our authentic selves and we mold them into this carefully crafted performance. And who is this performance for? Well, it's designed to win the applause of our parents, our friends, our teachers, and society as a whole. We turn into versions of ourselves specifically engineered to avoid rejection. But here's the really strange part. The more desperately you seek their validation, the more powerless you become over your own life. Now, this brings us to a terrifying, almost unthinkable idea from the source material, the dangerous lie about trauma. The radical concept here is that you might be actively using your past trauma as a convenient excuse to protect yourself from having to change today. I know, at first that sounds incredibly cruel, right? We're so used to saying, well, I'm insecure because I was hurt in the past. But this philosophy, it asks us to look at it from a completely different angle. Which brings us to a quote from the psychologist Alfred Adler that honestly changes everything. He says, "No experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead we make out of them whatever suits our purposes." Think about that for a second. Human beings don't just act automatically because of past wounds. We act for a specific purpose in the present. This brilliantly illustrates the massive difference between two major psychological schools of thought. On one side, you've got Freudian etiology. That's the belief that your past causes your present. Simple cause and effect. But on the flip side, we have Adlerian teleology, which argues that we actually use the past for present goals. And here is the real game changer. If your suffering has a present purpose, like giving you an excuse to avoid risky social situations, then your future is no longer fixed. You are actively choosing your response right now. Okay, let's take a step back for a minute and look at the root of all this. The philosopher in our text argues something absolutely incredible here. Almost every single emotional problem you have comes directly from your relationships and interpersonal comparisons. To put it simply, all of your suffering is social. Think about it like this. To completely get rid of your problems, all you would have to do is live in the universe all alone. Seriously, if you were entirely alone in the universe, the very concept of loneliness wouldn't even exist. Your insecurities, they'd vanish instantly. Why? Because there would be absolutely no one around to compare yourself to. But obviously, we don't live alone. Modern life constantly trains us to compete endlessly on what is basically the scoreboard of modern life. We are constantly measuring ourselves. We're chasing societal rank for status, we're enduring endless physical comparisons for beauty, we're measuring our worth by our output to define success, and we're desperately seeking digital validation for attention. Social media has turned life into this giant, exhausting game, and we are all trying to win a game that nobody even fully understands. So the big question is, how do we actually escape this endless scoreboard? Well, that introduces a mental tool from the text that completely rewires how we handle society. It's called the separation of tasks. Basically, this is the concept of not intruding on other people's tasks and entirely refusing to let other people intrude on yours. Guys, this is literally the boundary setting tool to end all boundary setting tools. Here is exactly how you turn that lofty philosophy into practical action. It's a super simple 3-step framework. Step 1, identify the task at hand. Step 2, just ask yourself, whose task is this? And step 3, do not intrude. By rigorously applying these 3 steps, you can finally cut through the tangled knot of all your social obligations and anxieties. To put it as plainly as I possibly can, what people think of you is their task. How you choose to live is yours. That's it. Most people absolutely destroy themselves trying to manage everyone's opinion of them. They want universal approval, which, let's be real, is completely impossible. But the exact moment you stop carrying other people's expectations around on your back, your mind becomes incredibly light. For the first time in years, you can actually breathe. And this leads us right to the absolute climax of today's explainer, and definitely the most controversial idea regarding what real unadulterated freedom actually looks like. Once you separate your tasks from others, what are you left with? Well, first, we have to conquer our own natural programming. The philosopher Kant called our natural desire to be liked an inclination. It's an instinctive, impulsive desire. And hey, it is entirely natural to want to avoid being disliked. We all feel it. But if you just let yourself roll downhill like a stone, constantly yielding to this inclination just to please everyone around you, you slowly disappear. You stop living authentically, and your life becomes a performance instead of a person. So we actually have to push uphill against that inclination. Which brings us to the ultimate mind-bending realization of the book. True freedom is being disliked. I know, that sounds wild, right? But it's true. This isn't about being intentionally cruel or a jerk to people. It's simply about not being afraid of the social cost of living your truth. True freedom means having the guts to let others dislike you, because remember, that is their task, not yours. Because think about it. If nobody dislikes you, you are probably sacrificing your authentic self just to avoid criticism. You are living for everyone except yourself. In fact, obsessing over how others see you is actually a deeply self-centered lifestyle. You become so overly concerned with the I and protecting your own fragile image that you completely stop engaging with the world freely. Which is exactly why the ultimate takeaway here is to just stop seeking permission. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical exercise. Applying this actually changes your confidence, your anxiety, your endless overthinking. The moment you stop living for applause is the exact moment life becomes quieter, calmer, and infinitely lighter. The world stops feeling like a battlefield, and you start experiencing it without those invisible chains of expectations. The simple truth is, people are going to judge you no matter what you do. That is their task. But the real question I want to leave you with today as we wrap up this explainer is this. Will you let that invisible prison keep you small? Will you keep shrinking yourself down because of the fear of being disliked? Because I promise you, the moment you stop living for applause is the moment you finally start living for yourself. Take that with you today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.